Melodic techno. The sound has evolved from its original minimal techno and trance roots, morphing into the powerhouse sounds of artists such as Anima, Masano, Argy, and Kevin DeVries. Today's melodic techno is very different from the original groovy driven tracks from around 2013. So in this video we will take a look at three main elements of today's melodic techno genre and how they have shaped the sound of today. Welcome. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm Shay Jose. I'm a DJ producer from Sydney, Australia, and I'm signed to labels such as UV Noir, Siona, Flashover Records, X Records, and many more. My music has been supported by some of the biggest artists around the world: Medusa, Paul van Dyk, Ferry Corsten, Armin van Buuren, Korolova, Miss Monique, and a whole bunch more. In today's tutorial, we'll be looking at three main elements of melodic techno. In this video, we'll dive into the essential elements that define the genre and how you can create your own tracks. Low end is one of the most important parts in any melodic techno track. You will find that many melodic techno tracks have a very simple but very clean and punchy low end. And this is really the foundation of what drives this sort of track and this sort of genre. We will be looking at Camel Fat's remix of Fidela's Night After Night as an example of a very good low end that uses very minimal sounds to achieve a maximum impact that can really be heard on the dance floor. So in this example, we have this remix from Camel Fat. If you don't have the track, I'll just play you a little snippet. So this track is a very good example of how very few elements can actually help build that low end. So let's start looking at how this has been put together and what elements Camel Fat has actually used to make such a driven track and have that low end sit nice and fat. To start off with, we have a kick. The first thing I always try and do is actually get a really good kick that's going to fit the track. Now this doesn't always happen from the start, but I usually look at sampling different kicks until I find the right kick that actually makes sense with the rest of the arrangement. For the purpose of this tutorial, I used a PML kick that actually sounds quite good on its own. And as you can see here, I've actually faded a little bit off the tail of the kick because it's just a little bit too long. And this actually allows the sub and the mid bass to actually come through a lot better. The other thing I tend to do now is only use one kick sample. I don't layer kicks anymore. I tend to find that if you find a really good kick sample, it actually glues your entire track together. You also tend to introduce phasing issues if you start doing different kicks over the top of each other if you don't get the phase correlation done correctly. So for the purposes of this track or this remake, I've actually just got one kick. We've got a little bit of an EQ happening here at the fundamental at around 50 Hertz and a utility. Now, this kick's already in mono, but what you should be doing as well if you want is also setting your kick to mono. Moving on, we have the bass or the sub. We've got a syncopated pattern happening here with a kick. And this is really just a sine wave with two semitones lowered. And as you can see here, the fundamental of that sub is sitting at around 57 Hertz, which is perfect for that translation of that low end to come through on smaller speakers and also on the large systems. I've also got a kickstart here, side chain to the kick, which actually removes any unwanted frequencies that may be clashing with the kick. Following this, we've got the mid bass. And in here, what we've done is actually rolled off a lot of the low end. So essentially the sub is taking up most of the low end all the way up until about 80 Hertz. And then we've got the mid bass coming here, and I've rolled off some of the top here as well. We've also got a very simple patch here, just two oscillators, one voice of unison each. A little bit of distortion, a little bit of reverb, and a little bit of filter. By adding the reverb and the delay, we're actually making this sound a little bit more stereo while only having one voice in each oscillator. We're adding a little bit of compression, a little bit of EQ. The other thing that Camel Fat actually did in this track to actually really glue their low end was actually put a 16th bass line in here. This is just sitting very quietly underneath the main driven bass pattern, and it's just got a little bit of a compression and the kickstart. It's not really actually doing a hell of a lot here, but with it on, it actually drives the track quite nicely. So if we were to turn this one on with a kick, and now without, and really in this example, this is the low end. This is actually what makes the track. It's very simple, it's very clean, not many elements at all. And when you hear it in the context of the entire track, it sounds something like this. The second technique that we'll be looking at as part of diagnosing this melodic techno genre is the atmosphere. And I'm not just talking about the FX rises, but really how we use automation to actually build an atmosphere that can actually create the vibe of the track. So for this example, we'll be using Argy's song with Omnia called Aria, and you will actually see how Argy has actually used automation to actually build the presence of this track and how it actually interacts with the synthesizers and the rest of the track. So let's get to it. So in this example, we can actually see how Argy has turned these very sort of 16 stabs into something very epic. So if we were just to listen to this particular element here, the synths. So once again, we'll be looking at this, and it's actually a very simple patch once again. A couple of voices, a unison, a little bit of reverb and EQ. But what actually makes this sound really pop out really is the way it's being EQ'd, the OTT that's actually driving some of that sound forward, and the use of delay. So what we've done here is actually just created an audio rack, and we are making sure that the delay signal is being compressed or ducked out of the way from the dry signal, using a bit of kickstart as well, using another clipper to make sure that those peaks are under control, and a utility. And really what we've got here, if we look at the automation, we've actually just got the automation coming in and out at certain parts of the track. And by doing so, we're actually building the tension and actually releasing the tension at specific moments. As you can see, it's not just one section of this being building up, but we also have these peaks and troughs coming in and out. Further to this, towards the end, we actually have this audio rack called Washout as well, which actually adds a white noise effect, but using reverb. And by the way, if you actually want to download this, just go to Bassclef's site and actually download this. It's completely free. But this actually adds a little bit more to the atmosphere of these synthesizers. So if we were to turn the cut off, you'll see how much this actually changes. So if we were to say delete the automation, and remove the delay, it just doesn't have the same effect. So playing this through now with the choir level, which is actually something Argy tends to do quite a bit. He's got a real knack for using really unusual vocals in his tracks. You will see that how this lead actually builds and then uses the vocals of the choir here to actually release the tension straight into the drop. It is a great use of very simple techniques to actually make this track sound extremely epic. Simple bass drum, kick and bass all the way through. And just using the automation on that cutoff. By the way, if you want to download this template, it's part of my Patreon program, so just head to the link below. Another example we'll look at is Kevin DeVries and Mal P's Metro. Now this track, once again, it's a very, very simple track, except the use of automation has really built that atmosphere. So what we can see here is we've got 1, 2, 3 layers in a lead. Let you hear what that sounds like. And then the second layer. Very simple pattern. It's actually the same pattern being played by different synths. So if we were to look at this, let me bring it up. This serum patch here, as you can see, very simple, 2 saw waves. And on the second one, very similar, just a saw triangle with another saw wave. But the magic in this patch really is actually moving the detune in each one of the synths. So essentially what happens is, rather than using the cutoff to actually build tension in this synth, we're actually using the detune to make this sound actually much wider as it builds up. As you can see from this macro here that I've got, I've grouped on both synths actually. I've actually grouped the detune to this macro, and it builds throughout the bar. And you will see how the noise actually changes, or how the synth actually changes as this plays through. So it's that detune sound which actually really makes these synths. When you play them together in the context of the track, you see how much bigger that synth actually sounds. And we're not really adding more compression or more volume. All we're doing is just expanding the stereo field by detuning those synthesizers. Now, if you want to get this template as well, once again, it's in my Patreon. Link is below. So the last component of melodic techno, which I think actually makes the tracks of today stand out a lot more, is the use of the automation in the leads, and how we use different components to attenuate certain elements of the synths. So for this example, we'll be looking at the tutorial or the remake that I did of Arbat's Flame. Now this track, once again, it's very simple, uses the same elements as the previous tracks. The only difference with this track is that the lead itself actually uses a lot of LFO automation to build the atmosphere. So what I'll do is I'll play you the track without the automation, and then we'll just go through the synthesizer and have a look at how this has actually been put together. So this particular synth is actually using a couple of things. It's actually got 2 layers. The first layer, 2 oscillators, one using 15 unison of voice with some hyper dimension, some compression, a little bit of chorus, and a second layer just pitched 12 semitones lower to add a little bit more bass, as you can see there. We're then running this through an amp, some saturation, a satin to dirty up the sound a little bit more, a little bit of drum bass, overdrive, some more saturation, a little bit of EQ and overdrive to taste, an OTT, because who doesn't love OTT, Oxford inflator, and the magic is really the auto pan. Now you can do this inside the Serum synth and actually set an LFO. I just tend to find it's a lot easier using an built-in Abelton plugin to do this. So I used auto pan. And what I've done here, I've just re-enabled this and set the amount to 100. And what we're doing is just automating the rate. As you can see here from all the automation lanes, put this down the bottom, we are moving the rate at different parts of when each note hits to actually build the atmosphere. And this is really apparent, especially in this breakdown. And this is something that you'll find in a lot of the tracks that are being produced today. A lot of the LFO movement, Colin does this a lot in his tracks as well. And the other thing that we actually do is add a little bit of delay and a little bit of Valhalla vintage verb for good taste. And we just I added an LFO here just to take some of that initial attack out. So in the context of the whole song, it sounds like this. Once again, using that cutoff to bring it down. And all we're doing here is using the auto filter to actually open the synth at certain parts. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. We went through a couple of the methods that the guys are using in the Melodic Techno productions these days. If you like what you see, make sure you leave a like, subscribe below, and share this video. It really helps the algorithm out. Don't forget that I've got a lot of these templates available in my Patreon program. The link's below. And I also provide one-on-one coaching for anyone that joins up. And I've got a couple of places open for the rest of this year. So until next time, this is Shay Jose signing out.